Zach Edey had a heck of a game against the Tennessee Volunteers that propelled the Purdue Boilermakers to the Final Four. After the game, Jonathan Givony, Draft Express, tweeted, "Zach Edey's 40 points will draw headlines, but his defensive impact was most notable from an NBA standpoint. Helped hold Tennessee to 7 made half-court twos, stepping outside the paint with impressive mobility and showing excellent timing, contesting shots with his 7'10" wingspan." For those of you who do not know, Jonathan Givony is the lead draft analyst for ESPN, but I have a real problem with what he tweeted here, and I honestly think there's a lot of missing context from what he's trying to imply about what Zach Edey did defensively in the game against Tennessee. So we're going to use this video to break down Zach Edey's defense, not only against the Volunteers, but we're also going to look at his pick and roll defense against other collegiate teams over the past couple of seasons. We're also going to look at some of his Team Canada film back when he played against Team USA specifically, so that we get an idea of what he'll look like on an NBA floor. And we're going to also evaluate some of his best traits, some of his best defensive moments. We're going to look at some of his great offensive tools for this overall scouting profile. I'm very excited to talk about Zach Edey. He's a very polarizing prospect right now. A lot of people love him, a lot of people hate him. I find myself somewhere in between. I think there's a role for him in the NBA, but I don't think it's as a lottery pick, which is what Jonathan Givony continues to say. He's a lottery level talent. I do not believe that. I think there's at least 20 to 25 guys I would draft ahead of him in this year's draft. Of course, I don't have my actual big board out yet. There's subject to a little bit of maneuverability there, but we'll see where I land on Edey at the end of the process. I hope you guys do enjoy this video. If you do, make sure to leave a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel for more, and let's jump into Zach Edey's defense here. This first clip comes from the beginning of the season, and this is him in the pick and roll. Look at his pre-play positioning. I think that's one of the most important things, one thing that I've really started to hyper fixate on in the past 12 months or so. Early positioning. If you're out of position early, there's a good chance you're going to be out of position late. If you look at the way that Purdue is aligned here, Edey's in drop coverage, and this is one of the flaws in which you'll see him struggle at the NBA level, is teams being able to punish drop coverage in different ways than they do in the college game. But if you also look at Purdue's other players, and I think this is an important setup to what Jonathan Givony is missing in his evaluation on Zach Edey and his game against Tennessee, was how he actually looked defensively with the team context around him. Matt Painter, I think, is a genius. I think one of the best coaches in college basketball, and he has really built Purdue's defense to be a strong unit around Edey and to kind of hide some of his deficiencies and make him look better defensively than he honestly is, which is tricking a lot of people right now, in my opinion. I don't think Edey is a flat out really terrible defender. I think there's some traits that he has, like his length, like his size, that are going to help him in some facets of the game defensively, but there's a lot of deficiencies as well. So if you look at the positioning around him here, Purdue is shrinking the floor. This is something that they do a ton of. They are content with giving up three-point looks to eliminate shots at the rim. They want to force teams to hit jump shots against them. And if you look at how they're positioned, you've got multiple guys in or around the paint right now, Edey being one of them. You have a lot of players, all of them actually, looking at the basketball. They're all in spots ready to help or dig in, which is important. So when we look at this clip, play it forward a little bit, we have a dig from the strong side corner. Weak side corner has a foot in the paint still, and the weak side wing defender also is facing toward the basketball, ready to help in on the roll man. Looking at this play here, big thing, the chase defender does a good job staying attached to the ball handler. That will be an essential part of making Edey a proficient defender in the NBA, is having good chase defenders around him, guys who can navigate and maneuver screens really well. I think a great example or a great comparison is Brook Lopez right now with the Milwaukee Bucks. Think about how dominant he was a year ago defensively when Drew Holiday was his screen navigating point guard. They trade for Damian Lillard. All of a sudden the Bucks defense looks porous like a sponge. There's reasons for that. Screen navigation, screen maneuverability is one of the most important things in today's game. So if Edey goes to a team that has a bunch of guys who can navigate, maneuver screens, stay connected to the ball handler, he'll be a much better defender in those types of systems. But if you get him to a spot like Milwaukee is this year, or maybe a situation like Washington where there's not a lot of great defensive players yet, there in the fold, I think he's going to struggle mightily on the defensive end of the floor because there won't be players staying attached to the ball handler. Remember, these are going to be better ball handlers, better shot makers at the NBA level with more spacing. The rest of this possession, though, kind of highlights some of the strengths of Edey. If you're facing someone who's going to sit in the dunker spot or kind of occupy the paint, he is a good rim deterrent. He's big, lengthy, obviously kind of is, I would say, a deterrent around the rim to others, especially smaller guards. Some wings are probably going to struggle to score over him because he is just naturally a large human being. And I don't want to hear people saying, well, if he was 6'7", he'd be a plumber. Well, you could say that about a lot of guys. If Giannis was 6'2", would he be Eric Bledsoe? I mean, it's kind of a wasteful topic. It's not something that's actually good evaluation. There's no point to actually touch on that or talk about that. So I just wanted to clear that up in this video. That's not evaluation. Okay, if LeBron James was 5'4", he would probably not be in the NBA. It's just kind of a silly topic here. These clips against Arkansas are some of my favorite to break down here. With this screen here, the screener's coming up. Looks like he's going to be setting it towards the ball handler's right side, but he actually sets a Versatility screen where he flips his hips at the last second. And with Edey, this is where you're going to see some of the issue with his lateral mobility. Jonathan Givony is saying that he flashes good lateral mobility. I don't know where he's seeing that because that is just not true at all. In clips like this where we have a Versatility screen and the guard is now pushing to a direction opposite of where Edey's pre-positioning was, Edey is almost useless in a lot of ways. Edey is out of position, he's chasing. Now does a pretty decent job trying to get back in front of the ball handler here. Now, the one thing I'll say about that is he took a really harsh angle toward the rim. In the NBA, there's guys who are capable of hitting pull-up jump shots, pull-up three-pointers. Think Damian Lillard on the offensive end. Think Kawhi Leonard, Luka Doncic. Those are the players who are going to be running a ton of these pick and rolls. Zach Edey is going to get feasted on in those situations because of the positioning. Even with him trying to cut off the actual angle to the rim, players in the NBA are too good at shooting long distance threes, pull up threes off the bounce, pull up mid-rangers off the bounce. And I know people are going to say, well, there's not very many mid-range jump shots. The players who take them today are the stars. Dame takes them, Luka takes them, Kawhi Leonard takes them, Paul George takes them. The top end players, Jimmy Butler, all take mid-range jump shots. It's just the NBA's cut out, your seventh guy taking mid-range pull-ups. That's not really a thing anymore, which is good. It's good for basketball. But Edey's going to be attacked in some of these situations. And if you look at how Purdue is trying to cover him up in some ways, this was a pick and pop. Number 8 catches the ball at the top of the key, and we get a blitz, or not a blitz, but a stunt rather, from a Purdue Boilermaker player. It helps cover up Edey for a second. This is smart. There should be another ball rotation here, though. And in the NBA, this is going to turn into wide open three-pointers if teams try to guard this way. Even then, with the stunt, Edey is still too slow, too flat-footed, and honestly just doesn't get to a spot. This is wide open. Even with him standing at 7'4", this is a wide open jump shot, and Arkansas makes them pay for his pick-and-roll defense there. Let's get to another Arkansas clip here. This is just a standard pick and roll in which the guard is actually going to snake the screen here. With that, Edey is now out of position, flat-footed, and gives up his foot toward the left side. So you got the guard now attacking left. Edey does actually a pretty good job. Again, this is where that length and size deterrence is going to be important for him. Guards are not going to want to try him at the rim. I think the big thing is guards are going to feast on him in the mid-range area and from behind the arc on pull-up threes if there's a good screen set. So this is where Edey has a big plus in the defensive column as a prospect. He is so huge, so lengthy that he's going to stop guys from trying shots at the rim, which is a huge element of good team defense in the NBA. So again, I don't think Edey's a just black hole on the defensive end of the floor, but I don't think he's going to be anywhere near a good defender in the NBA because of situations like this. Teams are going to want to isolate him. And look at how Purdue is guarding this. This is where that team context again is so important. They've already essentially double teamed the ball here. You have a player standing above the nail here, guarding nobody other than helping Edey in the gaps. So they're filling up the gaps. All 5 guys have their eyes on the basketball. That's good. It's a good team concept. Again, I think Matt Painter's done a great job with this unit. It's part of why they've won so much this year. But you can't credit Edey here with a stop in this situation with how the gaps are getting filled by Purdue. Edey here, again, switches out onto the perimeter. This is not what you want to do in the NBA, and this is what I'm talking about here. Edey, it's going to look like he does a decent job staying in front of this guy. Look at how far off he's sagging from him. If that is an NBA starting point guard, that's probably going to end up being a pull-up three. That's the issue here. He's giving up too much space. The guard now, again, gets to the rim, gets a kick out, but this is what teams are also going to get a lot of against Edey in the NBA. A lot of kick out threes because their team defense, if Edey's gets caught in isolation, there's going to be a need for help defense. A lot of guys are probably going to naturally find themselves gravitating a little bit closer to the paint to fill the gaps for him, and it's going to give up some easy looks from behind the arc. Edey here in a side pick and roll, just really not a lot of feel there. The guard got all the way to the rim. Another high screen and roll here. Edey this time, I think his pre-positioning is very good. He's in position to cut off the ball handler, but still in a spot where he could probably attach himself to the roll man. So this is good positioning and actually does a great job here cutting off the ball handler. So again, when we're looking at him within 10-15 feet of the hoop, that's where his value is going to be on the defensive end of the floor. So if you have good screen navigators, or if you have a team concept that has a lot of length and guys who are very good at closing back out onto the perimeter, you can fill the gaps around him a little bit more and make his life easier and deter some of those pull-up jump shots from both the three-point line and mid-range area. But Edey, if he's able to really contain initially, that's where his value is going to be. He's not going to be an isolation defender, but there are some benefits still defensively for his game, although I don't think it's as strong as Jonathan Givony has suggested. And we've seen it from guards being able to blow by him. Now, again, college guards, they're not capitalizing on those opportunities as much as NBA guards would. But if you're watching him in film, Purdue's allowed him to switch into isolation, but they use gap defenders a ton to really cover him up, and it's not great defensive basketball at the point of attack if he switched out onto space, obviously, but I also think there's some real flaws in his pick and roll drop coverage because of the lack of his lateral mobility, and this is where we're going to see a lot of that against Tennessee. This is from one of their pet plays the Volunteers run. It gets Dalton Connect off of a little curl screen basically out of the corner where he catches the ball in this mid-range area, and they were really going at Edey in this format. Givony highlighted that Tennessee had only made 7 2-point jump shots. I wouldn't say this is good defense, though. Okay, Dalton Connect, I mean, he connects on that one. Let's see another play here. And again, sorry about the film here on this one. It's a little grainy. This is the best video I could find and download. But this is not good defense. This is another open shot for Dalton Connect. He just doesn't get this one to go, unfortunately. So it doesn't go in the box score as a made 2-pointer. But look at them attack Zach Edey in some of these situations. You're going to see, again, right here, Dalton Connect coming off of that little curl screen, walking into what is an open jump shot. Zach Edey is not confident enough to step out there. Dalton Connect misses, but it doesn't make it good defense just because he missed. You have to evaluate the positioning. You have to evaluate his ability to hedge out into space, especially on curl screens like this. This is another situation where it's not an on-ball pick and roll, but his lateral mobility is going to get tested a lot of times in these ways. Think about him facing the Golden State Warriors or facing the Philadelphia 76ers with Buddy Hield. Teams are going to use big men to set off-ball screens to get shooters into space, and Edey's not going to be able to really challenge those guys on a consistent basis. Here he is in a high ball screen situation again, and look at how Purdue is guarding this. Right now they have essentially 4 guys in the paint. One, the 2 guys on ball now, Edey and the help defender that was taking off of the baseline, they're not in the paint, but they're basically in the paint. Look at how they're guarding this. A lot of help to Zach Edey. It's, again, smart college system, but you want to know why they gave up more 3-point looks than 2-point looks in this game? It's because they were collapsing everything. Again, shrinking the floor. Look at the way Purdue's guarding. You've already got a tag man basically under the rim. You're going to give up NBA 3-pointers like this, and you're going to lose a ton. And even with them playing this style, Edey, his lateral mobility and his feel for his positioning in drop coverage still isn't great. In this situation, gives up a little mid-range jump shot. Now in the NBA, look, that's a probable not efficient shot, not the way teams are going to want to play, but Anthony Davis will make that shot. Rudy Gobert can make that shot in the NBA. So you're looking at Edey probably going to have some challenges when it comes to containing not only the ball handler, but also the roll man in drop situations. Look again at how Purdue is guarding here. All 5 guys are below the break, where the break would be in the NBA, and 4 of them literally have feet in the paint. They are going to be shrinking the floor, and because of that, they are going to give up wide open threes. Now, Tennessee didn't make them pay on some of those opportunities. It's a big reason why Purdue won. But if you look at his positioning again here for Edey, this is an open jump shot. Now, pretty decent screen navigation. Purdue is able to get a contest on the shot late. But Edey isn't in great positioning to deal with a lot of these shots. So I think there's a little bit of a flaw here when we look at how he's actually defending and the type of shots Tennessee was able to get even though they weren't making them. And that's a big difference. You don't want to evaluate a player based on how well college players shot open jump shots against him. Like, that's not the best way to evaluate, because NBA players will make a lot of these shots. But again, this is where some of his benefit is. If you look at him as a deterrent, a big man around the rim, this is where he's great. He stalwarts the drive, forces a dump off to the big, and then he stands up and brick walls the big man. This is great defense from Edey, and this is where his benefit's going to be at the collegiate level and at the NBA level, is by walling up, presenting himself as a huge body, a huge shot blocker. He's not going to block a ton of shots, but he's going to have that effect where guys around him are going to struggle to finish at the rim just because of his size and length. That's really his big benefit. If you look back to a clip against Wisconsin earlier this year, this is one-on-one in isolation with a guard, does a good job standing him up, again presenting his length, stays on the floor, that's a big thing, and then ultimately does get the block and the rebound. He's a great defensive rebounder as well. He boxes out very well. Those are the benefits. Around the rim, he's going to be a quality defender at the NBA level. Now, some of the quickest guards, some of the shiftiest guards, Kyrie Irving, for example, guys who can finish below the rim in a variety of ways. Luka Doncic will still give him problems with his ability to play out of a stride stop and get to open spots on the floor, even in short distances. Edey will struggle mightily against those guys. Most players do, though. So I don't want to just sit here and beat a dead horse and say, oh, Zach Edey's going to be terrible against stars. A lot of players are not good against stars. But I think he's going to be especially bad in some situations. And if we look at his Team USA film, I think this is a great example here as well. Let's start over the clip. If you look at the way that he is going to defend in these clips, he's right now in the middle of the floor, right in front of the rim essentially. And then we get Bobby Portis coming up to set what looks like a screen, ends up ghosting it. Edey is out of position and flat-footed. This is where you're going to see some of that, kind of lacking lateral mobility become a real problem for him at the NBA level. And with this, Bobby Portis, after ghosting, goes into an immediate pin screen for Austin Reeves. Now, again, the pre-positioning here for Edey, he's out of position. He's playing in super deep drop. Look at how wide open this shot is. And this is what I'm talking about at the NBA level. These are shots for guys. These are open looks. He is wide open. Austin Reeves is here coming off of this. Now, he's not the best jump shooter, Austin Reeves isn't, so he doesn't actually take that open look. But he does get to a spot where, if we rewind it here just a little bit, again, watch this all the way through, he gets to a spot here where Canada ends up having to use 3 guys to defend 2 in the pick and roll. The strong side corner man ends up helping in on Bobby Portis' role because Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's out of position because he didn't have anyone communicating him during the Bobby Portis screen. Zach Edey is out of position because he's 1-2 low to guard Austin Reeves, but he's not even in a spot to tag Bobby Portis. This is about the worst spot you can be in as a defensive big man, so that's a huge problem. And because of that, the corner shooter ends up being wide open and getting a really great look at a three-pointer that he connects on. The next clip here, this is a little bit more of a standard pick and roll. Bobby Portis gets off of it at the top of the key. Halliburton then attacking. Again, this is wide open. Zach Edey's not even guarding this guy. Kelly Olynyk trying to switch. This is a 4-5 screen, so you really could switch if you're Olynyk and Edey in a situation that you'd want Edey to switch out into space, which you really don't. But hypothetically, you could, right? No communication here. Both of them commit to the ball. Bobby Portis ends up being wide open, and Halliburton feeds him. Looking at our next clip, this is Austin Reeves again handling the basketball. Bobby Portis setting a screen toward the baseline. Edey now gives up the snake, and this is where, again, you're going to see that lateral mobility. Out of position, ends up having to foul Austin Reeves because of his positioning. Austin Reeves again attacking here, gets it to go, and one off the glass. Team USA was able to eat against Zach Edey, and honestly, I think Zach Edey, this is one of the big issues with him from a prospect standpoint, is not only how is he going to guard in the pick and roll, how's he going to guard off-ball screens, and what does his maneuverability look like? I don't think he's a good lateral mover. He's 7'4". the point of drafting him isn't to get lateral mobility. The point of drafting him is to get someone who can score the basketball, can be a little bit of an offensive engine for you as a go-to scoring option, which that's questionable as well in some ways. But he's somebody who is going to protect the rim. He's going to be huge. He's not going to average 3 blocks a game. He's not going to be like Victor Wembanyama because he's not that mobile, not that athletic, doesn't get off the floor as well as Victor does. But what I do think is he's going to be a good rim deterrent because of his size. So when we talk about some of his offensive skills, he's got a very good right baby hook. That's going to be one of his go-tos. If you look at his efficiency this year on hook shots, he's shooting over 50% from the field on hooks. Now he is a lot bigger than most college players. He's also going to be bigger than most NBA players. 7'4", he's still huge. Now I think him getting up and down the court is going to be a little bit of a problem against rim runners. We'll see what that ends up entailing. Obviously it's going to force some bad switches for a defense if he's on that team. But I do think offensively there's some things to work with. He ranks in the upper 90s percentile wise as a pick and roll man. One of the most efficient screen setters and rollers in the college game today because of his size. And one thing that's really underrated, I think, is his hands. He's phenomenal at catching the basketball. And that might not sound like a lot, but there's a lot of NBA big men who struggle to catch the ball in tight spaces with passes, sometimes landing around their knees or at their waist. It's hard for big men to get their hands down there but effectively still finish at the rim. Zach Edey is very good at that. I think that's one of the more underrated elements of his functional athleticism is the fact that he's able to move and catch the basketball simultaneously. Again, it doesn't sound like a lot. It sounds like, oh, I could do that. You couldn't. At 7'4", you would really struggle to do that. And then he's able to finish off those opportunities. That is one of the more impressive things about him as an offensive player. We haven't seen him shoot at all. He has shot 0 mid-range jump shots this year, which is probably a check for him for the way NBA teams want to play. He's banked in 1 3-pointer this year, so you can't really look at him as someone who's able to stretch the floor. I think the best comp for him would be maybe a young Brook Lopez, a player who came into the league as a post scorer, was really, really bad defensively early in his career. As the NBA has evolved, teams have figured out ways to make Brook Lopez go from a bad defender to a great one. I think a lot of that has come with his actual experience and his understanding of the game and learning, and then of course getting utilized solely in drop coverage. So if you want to title Brook Lopez as a great defender, which I think at times he has been, last year if I had a vote, I would have voted him for Defensive Player of the Year because he was that good last season. This year though, he clearly isn't, and it's because of the surrounding context around him. And even last year, based on how he played in the regular season, I would have given him that award. But in the playoffs, he became a mismatch for Miami to attack and exploit because in their actions with Duncan Robinson and Bam Adebayo, dribble handoffs, off-ball screening, Miami was able to exploit the fact that Brook Lopez never, ever plays at the level of the screen. And in 2024, if you want to be a really good defense, you have to have some versatile defensive schemes. You look at what Minnesota is able to do with Rudy Gobert. They play him at the level of the screen sometimes. They play him in drop, and he's versatile and mobile to cover both things all the time because he's also huge, has a great wingspan, incredible shot block timing, and he's just an impressive defensive player, one of the best ever to play in the NBA. Boston with Kristaps Porzingis, they have a bunch of good perimeter defenders around him, but Porzingis is also mobile enough to play at the level of the screen, guard out in space a little bit, but also still protect the rim. You look at, Bam Adebayo in Miami, we know how switchable he is. Anthony Davis, one of the more switchable bigs in the league. If you want to have a good defense in the NBA today, you have to, and I mean have to, have scheme versatility. You have to be able to play multiple ways because if you're one-dimensional defensively, like Brook Lopez is, it leads to playoff disasters. We saw it for the Milwaukee Bucks against the Miami Heat. We've seen it for the Bucks this year with some of the shortcomings with having Malik Beasley and Damian Lillard as their point of attack defenders. It's not just the fact that those two guys get cooked in isolation. It's really the fact that their pick and roll defense has been abysmal at times, even with Giannis Antetokounmpo on the floor. And even with Brook Lopez still being, I think, one of the better defenders in the league in his specific role. And I think Zach Edey, you're going to run into similar kind of issues with him on the defensive end of the floor. And then when it comes to places that I think Zach Edey could really thrive. There's a few that I want to talk about. First of all, I don't think it's crazy if he gets drafted in the back end of the first round. If a team in the 20s says, look, we're looking for a specific type of player, we feel like we're a championship caliber team, or we're a team that maybe is in the kind of center of a rebuild and we want to just know we're getting a good basketball player, because I think Edey is a good basketball player. I don't think he'll be a very good NBA player. I don't think he'll be a great NBA player, but I think he could be a serviceable NBA player. He's definitely better than Boban Marjanovic, but he's not going to be a true starting caliber big. But there's a few spots that make some sense. For example, the Denver Nuggets. They have been perennially struggling with their backup center play behind Nikola Jokic. Drafting Zach Edey with a pick in the 20s for them actually makes a good deal of sense. Edey is a veteran coming out of college. He's played 4 years of college basketball. We look at what they did last year. They drafted Julian Strawther, who was a little bit of an older college prospect. They drafted Hunter Tyson, who was a little bit of an older college prospect. Doing something like that makes sense because not only does it address a backup center spot for them, it gives them a player who could be a really unique rim presence for them defensively when Jokic is off the floor. And they already have the team context around him to still win. And if Edey ends up becoming kind of your third or fourth center anyway, someone who doesn't play a ton, it's not that bad. It's probably worth the risk for them. Another team that I think makes some sense in that regard would be Boston, taking a stab at just some more natural size and length for, allowing Porzingis to probably rest a little bit more, allowing Al Horford to probably age out of the league at some point, although it never seems like that's going to come around with how he just continues to play really high-level basketball. But I think some of these contender teams could use Edey in a way that they're able to make him work. I think Edey could be maybe not even an upgrade over Luke Kornet, but a different style player than Luke Kornet and still give them some success and some livelihood as a pick and roll screener. That's really where I think he could find his value there in Boston. I think another team that makes a good deal of sense is San Antonio. And this is one of my more fascinating situations. I think if you put him next to Victor Wembanyama, this gives you a lot of scheme versatility compared to anywhere else in the league. I think Edey with any other team, you're going to lose scheme versatility. But in San Antonio, I think you're going to be able to make him work. What I would do is I would never play him when Wembanyama's off the floor. I would only play the two of them together. And teams, like I said, are going to try and attack Edey in the pick and roll. I would try and blitz every single screen. We're going to double the basketball. It's an aggressive way of playing defense. But with Edey then, that way you're not asking him to guard one-on-one in space. You're not asking him to play in drop coverage that way. You're able to maybe if you want to at times, but if you're blitzing, you're going to force the ball out of the point guard's hands. And then what I would do is put Victor Wembanyama on the worst shooter, who is not the center. That way, you have Victor Wembanyama able to rotate in, take away the roll man. We've seen what his rim turns has already looked like as a rookie. He's only going to get better and better and better. He's probably going to win 3 or 4 defensive players of the year in his career at least. He's that good of a defensive prospect, that good of a defensive player. He's going to be the best defender in the NBA in just a little bit of time. So I think with Edey on the floor, you'd be able to make it work in a way that if you play an aggressive defensive style, for a couple minutes a game. Again, I'm not suggesting Edey would play 30 minutes a night. I'm saying Edey would play 12 minutes a night, maybe 10 minutes a night, something like that. I think San Antonio at the top of round 2 or wherever their next pick is outside of the top 10, outside of the lottery, Edey would be able to kind of slot in pretty well next to Victor Wembanyama. It would give you an interesting big man pairing where you have just the most size in the league, period. We've seen Minnesota kind of take a similar approach with Karl Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert, where Gobert kind of hides some of Towns' deficiencies as a perimeter and post defender. And I think Wembanyama would be able to do the same thing for Zach Edey. They'd have a unique offensive combination because of their size, ability to pass over a defense. Again, Edey has good hands, so he's going to be able to catch a lot of those passes from Wemby. It would be a unique pairing and one of the better situations, I think, for Edey in this draft cycle. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more content. Let me know what you think about Zach Edey and his pro potential in the comment section. Thanks again, everyone, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.